Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Whether you're watching it via video, whether you're listening on the audio, wherever you are, thank you very much for joining us. It's Muskoka Unlimited Podcast. I'm your host, Chris O'Cutesy. I have a very special guest today. It's Kirk Dunn of the Knitting Pilgrim. Kirk, welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
And before we get into the actual chatting, big thank you to That Little Place by the Lights, Italian Eatery, downtown Huntsville. You can't miss it. It's literally by the lights. And check it out and enjoy. Go have some lasagna from Mama Annie or any of their other wonderful things. So thank you to them. And let's get into the show. So, Kirk, the Knitting Pilgrim, let's start with the beginning. It's about what, like 15 years ago you started this, and how did it come to be?
Well, I started about 20 years ago, but it
Oh,
did
wow.
take me 15 years to complete. And it didn't start as a show. It started as an arts council grant. And I became a big knitter because I was an actor and I was looking for something to do during all that time when actors are sitting around. I mean, hurry up and wait, right? That's the actor's life.
Yeah.
So I picked up knitting and I loved it, and I got pretty good at it. And I had some people in the textile art industry basically say to me, I mean, sweaters are good, and you're doing a lovely job with sweaters. And I actually studied with a very famous English designer named Kay Fassett, who does fantastic artwork in clothing, in knitting. But these people said to me, you want to do something that is an art installation. You want to actually say something about the world, really become an artist, a textile artist, as opposed to just some guy who knits sweaters. So I came up with this idea, and this was shortly after 9/11, and I was looking at some stained glass windows, and I thought, wow, those are beautiful colors, because what I like is color. That's the big thing I like to work with in yarn. Um, and they had this issue with 9/11, and I was looking at the three Abrahamic faiths, so Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and wondering, why is it that they have such trouble getting along when they all come from the same root? And so I came up with this idea to knit these stained glass windows. So they're big, huge panels, but they look like stained glass windows, and they are the size of full-size stained glass windows. They're like 9 feet tall by 5.5 feet
Wow,
wide.
cool.
And I told the Arts Council, yeah, this will take me about 10 months. I think it'll be fine. Anyway, it took me 15 years. And and that's what the show is about. It's about because when I finished that 15-year process, all I had was this one project, and I didn't have 15 years of reputation to build on. I didn't have any other galleries that I'd shown at or any other exhibitions I'd done. I just had this one project, and so there was nobody in the art world was interested because they didn't know who I was.
Mhm.
And so my wife Claire is a writer, and she and I have done some writing together. And so we decided to write this show about that project, and
Nice.
we created a play about the problem of what it does to your life and to your marriage
Yeah.
to to go on a 15-year artistic journey,
Yeah.
and then what it's like to try to get that shown at the end and not have anybody, really not have the uptake that you were hoping for.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's what the show is about, and it's been incredibly well received. We're very, very pleased.
That is pretty amazing. And it's something I think a lot of artists in all genres can relate to is
Yeah.
taking on like an opus type project, and it just keeps going and going. And then you're finished, and yeah, it's fulfilling, soulfully fulfilling, but you're not getting the reception. You're not getting
Right.
the almost appreciation and love from the public eye that you would hope to get from something that you poured so much heart and soul and time into,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. It's yeah, like you said, it's very much the artist's journey. And the other thing that I was surprised by, because you know, the other thing too is it was my journey, and so
Mhm.
I didn't think it was interesting. I just thought it was painful and boring. Right? I did. So when it came time to actually rate the show and put it on, I was the one who was dragging his feet. Like I was
Yeah.
thinking, there's nobody's gonna come to this. Nobody cares about
Yeah.
this. Oh, I'm just gonna make a fool of myself. Do I really want to do this? And what turned out that the people who see it, and they don't even have to be artists, but people have a visceral response to it, and they say, "I totally get it.
Hmm.
That's my life. I
Yes.
have something in my life that's just like that. I mean, it's not knitting, but it's something
Yes.
else."
Yeah.
And you nailed it. Like that's it's painful, it's funny, it's joyful, it's a huge life work, and I
Yeah.
think that's the thing that connects with people. And again, no one was more surprised about that than I was. I thought it was going to be a disaster, but people just say, no, this is a show that is just about my life. It's about everybody's life. So
That's
it's been
awesome.
great. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I love the title, like the Knitting Pilgrim, because, like, as we know, pilgrimages are, touring and traveling and whatnot. And that
Yep.
suits well because you have been touring and traveling with this show and with this, performance, and sharing the story of, what brought you to do this, right? And what brought
Right.
this about. Um,
Yeah.
I did notice your upcoming show is actually gonna do a little bit of a fundraiser for Friends of Muskoka Watershed.
Yep. Mhm.
And how did that come to be? Just because we'll bring it a bit locally to promo that show, so people can buy tickets and stuff. So how did that all come to be?
Now, I'm not sure exactly. I think the good thing about the show, it's been succeeding through word of mouth. So I
Yeah.
think somebody had seen the show and said, "Hey, I'm from Muskoka. I want to bring this show up here. That we have an
Yeah.
audience for it. People would love it." And so that's kind of how that happened. And we are thrilled to be associated with the Friends of Muskoka Watershed. It's a fantastic organization and a great fundraising reason and opportunity. So that's fantastic. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. And now, have you done any? Is this your first time in Muskoka performing?
I think it is. I think it's the
Okay.
first time we, well, we had, I think we had a, a couple of dates booked in the neighborhood before uh, COVID hit.
Oh, gotcha.
And then, of course, COVID hit and everything went sideways and south, and those all got canceled. So now we're getting back to rescheduling those dates, and
Nice.
this is taking care of this particular uh, neighborhood. Yeah.
Nice.
So. Mhm.
Awesome, awesome. And so, just for anyone who's listening or watching, I'll still have the stuff on my website in a post, nice and easy, with a link to buy tickets. But if you're listening or watching, it's at the Muskoka Discovery Center, November 4th, November 5th. November 4th is an evening show. November 5th is a matinee. It's not only are you going to get to see an awesome show with a wonderful gentleman who I can already tell has got a great energy and vibe. Not only are you going to get to see that, but you're also going to support Friends of Muskoka Watershed and their important works, protecting our environment in Muskoka and beyond, because a lot of their cool works actually get spread across Ontario and other places through word of mouth and through sharing of scientific ideas. So that's all good. Little promo there.
As it should be. Yeah.
So, so Kirk, so now that we got, I just needed to get that in there, and just so people could know while they're listening. So, Kirk, from your perspective, when you're bringing this to audiences and you're connecting with that audience, what's it like for you to be, sharing this journey with them?
It's incredibly cathartic, and I find, as in, I think it is the way of all art, and I think in most of life, is it's best if I just if I try to get out of the way and I just present the story, right? And just I don't try to send it up too much, or just I just tell what happened, and I try to be honest and open, and reveal myself to share with the crowd. And the show is a great way to do that because it's me talking to them directly. It also there's a couple of things that happen in the show that actually help. As we begin, we've got baskets of yarn and needles on the stage, and I'm up there before the show and I'm knitting and I'm talking to people as they come in, and I invite them to take some needles and yarn, and we got projections, like we have projection screens, and it's all saying, hey, grab some yarn, do some knitting, or bring your own knitting anyway. And then and some people say, well, I don't know how to do that. Don't worry about it, I'll give you a lesson. And so we start with a little knitting lesson to start the show. And one of the things that happens when people are working with their hands is that it helps them actually open up. It takes a it and this is something I'm hearing, from interviewing kids, like school psychologists and interviewing kids, is they'd have them work with Play-Doh just so they could, it would help them open up and start talking about things. And I
Hmm.
think that's something that happens with the audience is as they're working on this piece of knitting, and looking at it and then looking up at me or putting it down and coming back to it, that kind of thing. It helps us make a connection. You kind of forget about the sensor in your brain that is
Hmm.
keeping you on guard about, who is this person, what are they saying, what am I doing,
Yes.
and that connection is easier. And so what I find is that, as the show goes on, I'm really connected to the audience, and they are really connected to me. And then at the end of the show, what happens is we have these three tapestries, and they're on stage the whole time, but they're covered by these projection screens. So throughout the show, we're projecting images onto the screen. Sometimes the videos of some interviews I did with a rabbi and a minister and imam, and other just visuals of my process, what the
Yeah.
thing looked like, and things like that. And then at the end of the show, we pull down those screens and we reveal the tapestries
Nice.
right at the end, and then we invite everybody up on the stage to come to take a look
Nice.
and to get as close as they like, or stand up and take pictures and do whatever they want. And by that time, there's such a strong connection between us all in the room. Really, it's not just
Yes.
me in the audience; it's the audience amongst themselves too. That we have a really great sort of half-hour big chat after the show. They're up on stage looking at these works of art, and it's an incredibly, I think, moving and connecting experience.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome. I love that. And and you're so right. When people are, they're doing things with their hands, they're sharing, they're paying attention, you're connecting with them in that kind of, next level way. That's
yeah,
just beyond the actual, oh, here's what we wrote, here's what, me and my wife wrote together, here's the play. It's more than that, right?
yeah, yeah,
It's like a very real feeling, and you're involved and they're involved in everything, right?
yeah,
So that's the cool part. I love that. I love it. It's
yeah.
just more reasons to come see your show.
There you
Uh,
go.
um, now, on that note, you do some workshops too, don't you?
I do. I do offer workshops. I don't think I can't remember if I'm offering a workshop here at this event. But what I do is I work with color,
Hmm.
and a lot of knitters are intimidated by color, but I'm not, just because nobody told me it was intimidating when I started. And so I just figured out how to do it on my own. And then when I found out later that people were like, "Oh wow, what are you doing? That's really impressive." I said,
Yeah.
"Really? I didn't know that. It's just what I did." Um, so I like to use multiple strands of color
Hmm.
as I work, and what it does, because what happens is it sort of the yarn twists, and you can mix colors um, with the yarn without actually treating them like paint. I mean, with paint, you've got if you take yellow and blue and you mix them together, well, the yellow and the blue disappear and they become green, right?
Gotcha.
Well, with the yarn, I can take some strands of yellow and some strands of blue, and I work with them together, and the yellow and the blue never go away. But when you stand back, you still get the green, right? So that's kind of the thing I love about these mixing colors in yarn. Anyway, so that's something I do that
Hmm.
a lot of people don't have experience with, and so I do some workshops about how to do that, and how to work your yarns together and your stitches together, so they don't fall apart, or they don't have gaps in between them.
Cool. Very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
Very cool. I love that. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And the thing about knitting too, it's such an accessible craft. I mean, it's really it's incredibly easy, which is one of the reasons it doesn't get a whole lot of respect. It's because anybody can do it. It's just
Yes,
so simple, and yet, as with so many things in life, from these very simple techniques, you can get incredibly advanced results,
for
right? You
sure.
can you can combine these two stitches, the knit stitch and the purl stitch, which is kind of all knitting is.
Yeah.
You combine them in such a way that amazing things can happen. And it's a it's a craft that brings people together. I mean, knits them together. It's just such it's a thing we associate with with our grandmothers, and
Yeah.
with warmth and with safety and
Yes.
comfort and all those things. So this all kind of plays into that. I guess the environment of the show,
Yeah.
and also of the workshop too. And knitting workshops are always really relaxed and pleasant and cheerful and a lot of fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's true. We do. It's warmth. It's togetherness. And it goes way back with the knitting circles. You right?
Yes. Right.
Right. So yeah, that's so spot on. And you know what? I know you say it's easy, but to do it well and to have the vision and the creativity to build something that's intricate and that's that has depth to it, I think it takes a lot of experience. I don't think
Yeah.
we should dismiss the expertise it takes to do something, that well, right? Like
Yeah.
I could probably learn how to knit like a scarf.
Hmm.
That's not
Yes, you
very,
could.
but I don't know if I could knit like a full, stained glass, window like yourself.
Yes.
Right? So
Fair enough. And but certainly the only thing that's difference between me and you, for example, is just an abundance of practice. That's
true.
it. You know,
Fair
it's
enough.
just practice, just time put in. That's all. That's all it is, really. But yeah, so that's what makes it so accessible and so easy to connect with.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So before, well, just a couple more things, and then we'll both get on with our rainy days in our respective communities. Um, so as I mentioned before we started recording, I noticed you have the Knitting Pilgrim Talks
Oh, yes.
podcast
Hmm.
with some really interesting chats with some, and it's very based on theology, right? Like you
Hmm.
said, the Abrahamic religions.
Yep.
I noticed that, and how did that come to be, and where does and how can people get involved and listen?
Well, that's a great question. The reason, so yeah, as I said, the theme between these three panels is that relationship between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And so,
Mhm.
what I did was I chose the main symbol of each faith, and
Okay.
I built that particular window around that symbol. And
Yes.
then inside that symbol, I placed some positive images of the faith.
Nice.
And then outside the symbol, I placed things that were a little more challenging, or things that I had questions about. Or how does this work? And how are we relating to each other here?
Yes.
Things like that. And so when during the show, I do mention a couple of the images and I explain them a little bit, but there's so many of the images on all three of these panels that I can't possibly address them all in the show. So what Claire and I did was we created this talk series, the Knitting Pilgrim Talks, the podcast, where I take one section of each tapestry and I talk to somebody about that section.
Cool.
So, for example, I've got one there with Rabbi Jennifer Gorman, and it's about looking at the role of women in Judaism, because my understanding of Judaism was that women weren't allowed to do certain things,
Yeah.
and it turns out, in fact, that it's not that they weren't allowed to do them; it's that they're excused from doing them, right?
Oh.
Because a lot of these things are times. They're time focused, like you have to do it at a certain time. Well, a woman is often caring for her family, which is the most important thing. So she can't actually do these time focused things. It doesn't mean she's not allowed to. It's just that she doesn't have to, because she's got a more important role to.
Gotcha.
And so that was something like, oh, I had no idea about that. And so we talked about that. And then, with Christianity, there are some, real, some things again, in this, we can actually talk about the patriarchy of all three faiths, because they began at a very patriarchal time. Just
Yes.
talking about how, women were a big part of the early church,
Yes.
And yet they were, as the church grew and became more established and more patriarchal, they got shifted and marginalized. And
Yes.
just, so I have a little section in the Christian window that's about that, about a female figure reaching up towards a figure of Christ and being sort of pushed off to the side. And then the same is true in Islam. There's
Yes.
a real patriarchy there, and we tend to think of it a lot about with head coverings and the niqab and face coverings and things like that. And yet, the truth is, it actually doesn't come from Islam. It's stuff from patriarchal societies around the world um, uh, that have embraced Islam, and they've brought in that patriarchy from the outside. But
Gotcha.
in fact, Muhammad himself was incredibly open to women, and because he was a child of a widow, and he understood how important women were in society. He was very inclusive, very open, and treated the women his life incredibly well. And in fact, an irony is that the first the first country to give women the vote was a Muslim country.
Oh.
It was a Christian country. Like, well, we didn't do it. it was the Muslims. So there are all these strange relations in there, and all these ideas that we have in our modern world that are a result of just us thinking that a snapshot we have of the world right now is the
Yes.
way it's always has been. When really it's not, and things have changed and adapted. And so the Knitting Pilgrim Talks is very much talking to people in each faith about the history of these sections of the window that I've done. So that's kind of what it is. It's very surprising, and I learned a lot.
Nice.
It was great, really great.
And where can people listen to that?
They can. I've got a YouTube channel, the Knitting
Nice.
Pilgrim, and also I think there are links off my website,
Okay.
kirkdunn.com,
Perfect.
and you can also pick it up on Spotify or anywhere you get a podcast. Just look for the Knitting Pilgrim Talks, and you'll be able to find it.
Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to put a link to your website,
Great.
kirkdunn.com, as part of the post when we post all these podcasts in the next week or so. So
Fantastic.
everyone will have they'll be able to get tickets to the show in Gravenhurst, the Muskoka Ward. They'll be able to check out more of what you're doing and have easy access to the Knitting Program Talks. So there you go, Kirk. We'll give you some good shout outs. And
Thanks,
you know
Chris.
what?
Appreciate that.
It's a great topic, and I love how you're exploring some the questions you have, because I'm sure the questions you have about a lot of these religions and these faiths are questions everybody has, or other people have, right?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to have like good, positive, and energetic discussions with people who are of those faiths, and I love the whole topic of the patriarchy versus is this really how we see things, or did this come into play later? And I love that. I love that. So on that note, I think we're good. Is there anything else you want to mention about people coming to your show?
No, just please, by all means, if you got some knitting you'd like to work on during the show, bring it along. And if you forget, that's okay, because we'll have you covered.
Awesome. Awesome. Kirk, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Chris. My pleasure.
And before we go, another quick thank you to That Little Place by the Lights, Italian Eatery, downtown Huntsville. Check it out. Go eat some lasagna, some gnocchi, whatever you want. They got it for you. Go manja. It'll be great. So thanks everyone for listening. Have a great day. Bye for now.